Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Bible Word, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Job chapter 23. Job is answering Eliphaz again accusations. And last time I spent kind of the whole study talking in chapter 22, chapter 23. I'm sorry, um, because I'm sorry, chapter 22, but because Eliphaz, who was the first to respond to Job, started off saying, "Look, man, you've done good to people. Your words were encouraging." And then now he's gone to saying, "You're just plain evil, dude. You have been horrible. You've been a horrible, horrible, mean, cruel individual." And where did this come from? And that's the amazing thing about this exchange with him. Like, where is this coming from here? Um, this is Job's response. Chapter 23. Then Job answered, "Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. If only I knew how to find him, so that I could go to his throne." Excuse me. Now remember, Job, in all of his, when he says that God's hand is bitter against me, that is true, because God allowed Satan to destroy Job's life. As I said, obviously for God's sovereign purpose, you know, this is going to play out as it is playing. So as I said, while Job thinks he wants to have a face-to-face with God, in which God is going to oblige him, he's going to eat those words so fast. Verse 4 says, "I would plead my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn how he would answer me and understand what he would say to me." Now, this is interesting because, again, this is such, as I said, a human response. And by human, we have to keep this in mind that, remember, much like when we look at suffering and or we see suffering, whenever we see that, especially too if the person is good, right? In other words, and remember, Job was the most righteous man on the planet by God's declaration. So when you see the evil, the kind of evil that happened to Job, you go, well, why? Now his friends are saying, well, obviously you're not as good as we thought, Job. I mean, obviously, Job, you did something wrong. Obviously, Job, you did something wrong. And then, of course, they're at the point now, they're just plain saying it. They're not even holding back, right? Eliphaz is coming right out. You were horrible to people. You were cruel to people. Now, these are false accusations. Now, and remember in the last session, and I want to say this because I think right here becomes a good place to address this too. You know, when we talk about why is there evil before God, and I said, remember that we don't have all of the information. We don't have all of the facts. We don't have, we know because if you start reading Job from, let's say, if you take out the revelation, the heavenly revelation, and you just read, you pick up on Job just as his suffering is hitting him, right? Then you can go, man, what did this guy do, right? And of course, you can come up with a whole lot of perspectives, especially from Job's friends. Now keep that in mind. In other words, if all we had from the book of Job without the heavenly scene, okay, without the heavenly scene, then you would just all of a sudden see this man who was a rich man who just lost everything. And you say, well, why did that happen? Now, I want to say this as I'm thinking about it. The book of Job does not and is not normative. In other words, so you don't have to kind of wonder if you're suffering or will you suffer like Job. But now some people say that. I mean, and you have people that when it comes to funerals, when it comes to whatever, they say some of the dumbest things you could say. They say some of the dumbest things, like God wanted a flower in heaven, so He picked that flower up, and meaning the death of your loved one. Excuse me. Well, here's my point. You don't know why good people die. You don't know why good people's death is prolonged. In other words, you don't have enough information. And I mean, some people, anyway. So the idea is that when Job says, I would plead my case, I want to know why God is doing that. And this is why this is important, because, we don't have to experience what Job experienced to kind of know, to get the wisdom, excuse me, to get the wisdom from it. We don't have to experience that, because there's a takeaway for us here. I mean, there is a wisdom that we can get from here, from learning from Job's foolishness. And this first thing is, I would plead my case before Him and fill my mouth with arguments. Now, you can make this statement. You can make this statement because God is not here. Like Job, God is not there. So you can make this statement. People can have all kinds of fantasies, dreams or whatever about God because God is not there. What would you do if you were in the presence of God? Job's going to tell us. Now, furthermore, and I'll give a little more information here, God is not going to answer Job's questions. God is not going to answer Job. He's not going to. Well, let me clarify. Excuse me. Let me clarify. Sorry about that. He's not going to. Okay. He is not going to explain himself. He's going to answer Job, but he's not going to explain himself. Okay. So when Job says, I would plead my case before Him. Now here is where the arrogance of Job comes out as a sinful human being. Even though God says he was righteous, he was. God says he was righteous as a sinful human being. Right? So he says, I would plead my case before Him. Now, like I say, mark this, because this is going to be, I'm writing this down because when we come back to this, but when he says, I will plead my case before Him and I will fill my mouth with arguments. Now he's saying before the Almighty. Now he's saying this because he doesn't have information. He doesn't have revelation. He doesn't even have experiential knowledge here. In other words, what's it going to be like being in the presence of God? Then he says, I would learn how He would answer me and understand what He would say to me. In other words, why did you let this happen? A lot of people in anger say this. A lot of people, do, say this in the time of their anger. People say this. People actually say this, right? That, they get angry at God. Now, again, same scenario here is because it is easy to say this when God's not around. That's the difference. Now, on some cases, obviously, you speak out of the anguish and grief. But sometimes we move further than that, and as Job is doing here, he is saying this as if God doesn't have an argument, or as if God will sit up and go, "Oh, gee, I don't know what to say," right? They Now, what Job is going to find out is that, yeah, God will answer him. Verse 5 says, I would learn how he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Then he goes on and says, would he prosecute me forcefully? No. He will certainly pay attention to me. Then an upright man could reason with him, and I would escape from my judge forever. Now again, with this statement here, he doesn't have enough information, right? What information doesn't Job have? Okay, what doesn't he have? What kind of information doesn't Job have? Now you think about all of the arguments that he can make. Now just stop and you think about this for a moment. All of the arguments that Job can make. What could he make? Now, first of all, let's keep this in mind. Job himself does not have revelation of what went on in heaven. In other words, he doesn't even know what God has said about him, that he is a righteous man, right? He doesn't know that. Job doesn't know that. So what is he going off of here? Why is he saying that I could plead my case before God? He will listen to me. And then notice this, verse 7, I would escape from my judge, meaning his arguments would justify him. Okay, his arguments would say, guess what, God? Can you say why you did this? Can you say why I'm suffering? Job then probably could say, here are my list of deeds. Now, forget all of what Eliphaz said, right? Everything that Eliphaz said was the exact opposite of what Job did. Let's go back for a minute because I want you to see his arguments here. And this is Eliphaz. This is back in chapter 22. Now, let's go back. I'll pick it up at verse number 4. Does he correct you and take you to court because of your piety? Now, remember this statement here, why this statement is not true. In other words, does he correct you and take you to court because of your piety? The reason why that's not true because God allowed Job to suffer not because he was right or wrong, because he's God. He says, and aren't your iniquities endless? Well, they're not. God said he was righteous. He says, for you took collateral from your brothers without a cause. Not true. Stripping them off their clothes and leaving them naked. Not true. You gave no water to the thirsty and withheld food from the famished, while the land belonged to a powerful man, and an influential man lived on it. You sent widows away empty-handed, and the strength of the fatherless was crushed. Now, this is Job did the opposite. He did the exact opposite. In other words, he was a good man. He clothed the naked. He fed the hungry. He did not take interest from people. So everything that he says here is the Job is the exact opposite. Now, the idea then, from Job's standpoint, is that he knows all of this about himself, and so now he's going to say, I would plead my case before him, meaning God, and fill my mouth with his arguments. I would learn how he would answer me. That's where he's getting wrong right here. And I would understand what he would say to me. Would he prosecute me forcefully? Now, Job was remember, Job was like, I didn't do anything wrong. Now, first of all, before you say that, you're dead in sin. That makes you wrong before God. You're dead in sin. He says, no, he will certainly pay attention to me. Then an upright man could reason with him, and I would escape from my judge forever. That's his view right here. That is Job's view as he is slipping over into a self-righteous attitude. The idea with Job is this. The reason why he is wrong, not because that when he says, I can make my arguments to say, now put it like this, it would be like, and I've said this to my children, that what you think you're owed, for example, if my children watch television, they see all of the Keeping Up with This Family and all of these stars whose children are the beneficiary of their parents' wealth. And the idea is that, first of all, children, you're not owed that. I never forget about one of the richest man. We're talking this man probably back then 70, 80 billion dollars. Now it's double that, but 70 billion dollars. I remember hearing a story where he said that he was only going to leave his children something like 10 million. Now think about that for a minute. He was going to leave his kids only $10 million. And I thought, man, if I was his children, I would be, highly upset with dad. 10 million? Now, first and foremost, let's kind of go back. Does his father owe his children that? And by the way, just think about it. Does his father really owe him that? Well, what exactly does his father owe his children? So if I'm his child thinking, you can at least leave me $1 billion, right? $1 billion would be far beyond, but 10 million? Really? 10 million? He's divorced now, and the wife got half, so the kids are like, yeah, divorce that dude, okay? But my point going back to is that his father wouldn't have been wrong. See, if you want to measure what is right and wrong, his father wouldn't have been wrong. I would have had issues, certainly, but he, in a sense, it was his money to do what he wanted. Now, I say that because, remember, God, what Job here is trying to insinuate, God has the right. Where he is wrong is that God is God. That's where he's wrong. That he's not on the level with you. He can do what he pleases. It is not wrong for God to do what he wants with his own. And Job and all of mankind are gods, to do what he wishes, to do what he wants. All right, we'll pick it back up in this chapter here. But kind of insightful, because this is how a lot of people feel. Okay? Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. As always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Please hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next study.